What's up, Carolina fans? This is Phil Harris here once again at the Ruckin Roosters show. And this time around, I have a very, very special guest. I always say that, but this one really is special, okay? We've got Brad Muller. He is the voice of the women's basketball team for your Gamecocks. Brad, how the hell are you?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me on.
It's been a blast that you're able to come on here. I'm really, really happy. We were talking prior to, so we had a little bit of fun there as well. But let's get right into it. Where are you from, sir?
Well, I'm originally from Stamford, Connecticut. Grew up in the Northeast and lived there, all the way through high school. And it was time to go to college. Wanted to go somewhere different. Ended up at South Carolina and then stayed in the South after graduation in 1992. And I guess the rest is history.
Stamford, Connecticut, the home of WWE, I believe. Is that
That's
right?
correct. Yeah.
How about that?
It's funny, when I was in college, I actually tried to get, when I would go home for the summer, I tried to get an internship there during the summer.
Okay.
I didn't know what I was doing. I was like 19 and I just drove up to the big building there and I couldn't even get out of my car. This big guy in a blue blazer that looked like he had, been in the weight room and maybe had some help, stopped me and said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, I wanted to drop off my resume to see if I could do a summer internship." And he said, "I'll take it." And I was like, "Well, I just want to go inside and drop it off with somebody." He says, "You can't." And I was like, okay, never mind. So
you didn't ask him to tell Vince to come outside to grab the resume?
I was afraid he was going to, pull a chair out of his back pocket and hit you over the head.
Yep. That sounds about right, actually. So, that's awesome. Stamford, Connecticut. I used to go down there quite a bit to actually travel into the city with the commuter train there. In fact, our women's basketball team there at the Final Four, when we won at Madison Square Garden, I left my car there, went down there, made that trip, came back up that night. So yeah, that it has some special memories for me in terms of Gamecock basketball. So what is your origin story with rugby, though?
Well, it started at the University of South Carolina. My sophomore year, was just kind of looking for something. The fraternity thing wasn't for me, and had played sports all my life growing up. And then a buddy of mine had a friend that was already playing rugby at South Carolina, and he talked me out into it, said, "Hey, why don't we go check this out?" I said, "All right." And so, went to my first practice my sophomore year, and I was absolutely hooked on day one. Chris Murphy, who's a board member for the Cobb Foundation, was the captain at the time. And I loved everything about the first practice. We used to practice on the old band field, which is a dorm now. It's across the street from the Blott PE Center there in Columbia. And I just absolutely loved it. And right after the first practice, I was told the basic rule or unwritten rule was that after every practice, you had to go to the basically the social engagement after each practice. You had to go. You didn't have to do anything there, but you had to go.
Sure.
And just at least, make an appearance. You couldn't go home and shower. So, you're all sweaty from 2 hours of practice. And at that time, it was a place called the Big Bird, which in Columbia was, it doesn't exist anymore. It was this little hole in the wall on Main Street across from what used to be the towers, the honeycomb dormitories there.
Okay. Yep.
For people that live in Columbia now, it's kind of near where Moe's is there on Main Street.
Nice.
And it was just this little downstairs little bar that just had draft beer and wings, and pitchers were $2 for the rugby team. And
what a deal.
Yeah, 50-cent pool tables and a jukebox, and that became our hangout after practice. And as much as I enjoyed the practice and meeting the guys and the game itself and learning about it, the whole social aspect on day one had me hooked. And I realized, yep, these are my people.
That's awesome. It's so interesting. We talk to a lot of these guys that come on here about their origin story with rugby, and it really starts for a lot of them in college. Somebody kind of drags them to a practice, and it changes their life forever. And I know that you've been involved with rugby for a long, long time. We're going to get into a little bit more of your career in rugby outside of Carolina, your journey there. But I wanted to go back and talk about just Carolina rugby specifically for the moment. Any team or individual achievements that you're very proud of during your time at Carolina Rugby? Not talking about how many beers you put back at one time or anything, but
it's funny because there's so many of the moments, in terms of the games that kind of just all blend together. It is the people and the experiences that you have with those people that you always remember. And as you know, I'm still very close to a lot of those guys from USC that I played with 30 years later, but I can remember a trip we took to a Mardi Gras tournament. I believe it was in 1990. and we rented two 15-passenger vans. I don't know how we made it there, but we did. But I do remember I scored my very first try at the Mardi Gras tournament. And the only reason I scored it, I started the game at inside center, and the guy that was playing fly half for us at halftime, he had to go to the bathroom really bad. So he ran out, and he wasn't back in 5 minutes. So I just slid over to fly half, and like within 2 minutes of the game, ball's down near the try zone. We get a scrum, ball comes out of the scrum. I get it, run 5 meters, touch it down, and that was my first ever try. And so that's what I remember in terms of my first score was at a Mardi Gras tournament, only because my teammate had to go to the bathroom.
Hey, when you got to go, you got to go. And that's your first try ever. So you'll always remember that. Pretty wild stuff right there, Brad. That's awesome. Favorite moment in a Carolina jersey? Was it the first try, or was there something after that?
Oh gosh, there was a lot. That was certainly up there. Again, so much of it just goes back with the with the guys. I remember the first game I started on the A side. We were at a tournament. It was my first semester playing. I think we were playing at a tournament at Georgia Southern, perhaps. And our coach Howard Hunt at the time, and our captains Chris Murphy and Matt Ely, who was another forward. They were talking about wanting to make some change because we hadn't played well, I guess, in the first game or in the previous game before that. And they said, I remember overhearing them say, why don't we put the new guy in? At least he'll hit somebody. And I just kind of remember that, like, I guess I made an impression in my first couple of weeks. And they put me in the starting lineup, and I was a starter, from that day on. And I just always remember, like, wow, I'd only played like in one game, but they had enough confidence to put me in. And I just remember that felt pretty good. Because there was a lot of good guys on the team. And so that was certainly a moment that stands out. Just getting to travel and play some, at some cool places. I always had fun when we would go down to the Citadel. In fact, as much as there's always the rivalry with Clemson, I felt like at that time, during that time period, we had a really good rivalry with the Citadel. And part of it was because they had this guy, this Marine who was playing for them, who was about 30 some odd years old, that was just more experienced than all the college guys that were playing. Right. And it didn't matter where he played on the field. He was always dominating. And it seemed like wherever I played on the field, he was always lined up across from me, wearing me out. And I would try to wear him out. But he was just this big, muscular Marine. And I just always remember those games with him against him. And I just remember how neat it was to go on a campus like the Citadel, and you'd see all the freshmen walking in line, and we're all there hanging out the windows, woo, driving onto campus. So that was fun. It was, just getting a chance to travel and go to a lot of different campuses was fun. Sometimes playing men's clubs that you shouldn't have played because they were a lot better than you, but just, getting to travel and go to a lot of cities. That's where a lot of the memories are really made. But I think most of the games that I remember the most had to do with us playing the Citadel, and it was basically because of that one Marine that was always lined up against me.
Right. Yeah, he always annoyingly lined up against you. You tried to get the best of, but he always got the best of you. So that's pretty cool. For sure. Like, it's one of those things where, like, you go to With You Weekend, you were there in attendance this past one, and you talk to all these older guys, and they have tons of stories, and when they talk about Carolina rugby, they just come alive. Like it was the best time of their lives, or close to the best times of their life, and they really, really appreciate it, and it stuck with them, and that's something that they just want to continue to talk about, tell stories about. That's why this show kind of exists to a certain extent. It's just to get those stories out there and keep them alive for future generations. Wyatt Shepard, your college roommate, he was hanging out with me at the one of the With You Weekend events, and we were talking, and then somebody goes, Shane Beamer's here, and I'm like, what? And then we look over, and it's you. Just they were messing with you, and I go, Wyatt, I can't believe he's here. He's like, oh, that was my college roommate. I was like, what, really? So we've got some stories that we will not be telling on the air that Wyatt told me, but yeah. After college, your rugby journey continued. Tell us about your time with Georgia College and founding that T-shirt that you got on there, Making Love Rugby Club, which is a fantastic name.
Yeah, it started. When I graduated from USC, I played for about a year with Old Gray there in Columbia, the men's club, and then moved to Georgia for a job down there in broadcasting and sports administration. And it just kind of lucked into it. I hadn't really I enjoyed playing the game, but I wasn't sure if there was going to be a rugby team in Milledgeville, Georgia, a small town near about 30 miles east of Macon, Georgia. And when I first got down there, fortunately, a guy who was a physics professor at the college was starting a rugby club at Georgia College. He had played at the University of Florida, and I happened to bump into him at like a place that designs T-shirts, because I saw these shirts he was picking up, and I said, "What is that?" And he says, "Oh, I'm starting a rugby club here at the college." And so I introduced myself, and I said, "I'm not in college anymore." I was like 23 at the time, or and I said, "But I'm, can I play?" He's like, "Yeah, well, you can play." So I started playing with them and helping him coach the team for a couple of years, and then they struggled to get consistent numbers out. And then as the university got bigger, we kind of lost our field. They put some dorms on it. So at the time, there used to be an old rugby club in Macon, Georgia, called the Macon Cadillacs, that had kind of existed briefly, fizzled out, and some of those leftover guys had heard about us in Milledgeville and were playing, some games and tournaments with us. And then finally we decided, you know what, Macon's a little bit of a bigger city, and we need to move it there. And what's to start recruiting around the city. There's an Air Force base on the other side of Macon in Warner Robins. We said maybe we get some military guys, So long story short, we kind of combined these former Macon Cadillacs and some of these Georgia College folks and created the team in Macon. And Macon Love, I think it was my idea. There was and it started because there was a minor league hockey team at the time in Macon, Georgia, called the Macon Whoopie. All right. Yes. And I know it was great. And so, it didn't take, too much for the words to get in my head. I said, what if we did Macon Love? And all the guys thought it was funny. And so we did it, had the T-shirts printed. And you know how it is with rugby. We had a really diverse group of guys. We had some guys from the college. We still had some college students from Georgia College and from Mercer University, which is in Macon. We had some military guys from the Air Force Base there in Warner Robins, which was great because some of them were experienced, and the ones that weren't were in really good shape anyway, since they were military. So that kind of helped us get a feet under it. We had some of the old Macon Cadillacs guys. We had different guys that were helping us out coaching it. We had this Australian guy for a while that was really good. And then just word kind of spread, and we got some good support from the community because we had guys that were out there. We had one guy on the team who was a lawyer who had a lot of contacts, so we could get some sponsors to get some nice jerseys and some nice kits and things like that, and knew somebody at one of the local watering holes that wanted us to be the place that would. We'd have our after parties and things like that. So it took off pretty quick. We weren't always the best team. That started around 1999. And it actually started with during the summer, we were playing sevens. And so we said, all right, let's just try to make a name for ourselves. And the very first sevens tournament we went as Macon Love, of the few guys we had on the team, most of them couldn't make it that weekend for whatever reason. So we went with 5 guys to a sevens tournament. Said, we'll pick up some guys. And as luck would have it, some guys that I played with at USC were there. I think Mike Artlip, I think Todd, Philly Schuster, maybe Butch Setzer, some of those other guys just happened to be there. So they came on and played with us, and, they knew some guys and then it took off. I think our second tournament, we had 6 guys, then we had 7. And by the end of the summer, we had like 25 guys that were coming out regularly, and it just took off.
Awesome.
Yeah, it was neat because we had some good years and we had some bad years. We had some, but it was fun. We were playing a lot of teams in Atlanta and Valdosta, Georgia, and Florida, and then we'd come up to Columbia sometimes. So it turned out to be good. I believe the club is still going. I left there in 2006, but had a lot of fun. And just like at USC, met some great friends that I'm still friends with, even though we're all retired now. I played for 17 years and then that was enough.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good long run there, Brad. Yeah. You did a fantastic job with that. Macon Cadillacs is a great name, but Macon Love Rugby Club is right up there as like one of the best of all time. So congratulations on coining that one for sure. I'm the chairman of the Carolina Rugby Hall of Fame committee, and we're tasked with selecting our first Hall of Fame class. So I wanted to ask you, from your era, who do you think is deserving of a Garnet jacket and why?
I think there's several, and unfortunately back then nobody thought to keep statistics and things like that. And, that back when we played in the 80s and 90s, but off the top of my head, and I know some of my friends that are listening might throw a pie at my head on this, but I think Howard Hunt, for what he did for the rugby club for a long time. He was my first coach. He was a player at USC back in the early 80s. He was the coach several times, several stints. Whenever, they kind of needed a coach, he'd kind of step in. And then he kind of helped organize Cobb, the Carolina Old Boys. He helped make that a thing, make Cobb Weekend a thing. When I was a student there, I think that's when it became an annual event. I think the first and second annual events were something I was a part of, and that just became a thing where he was the one that was sending out mailers to people, to people that he played with, and word of mouth. Back before there was the internet and email, he was sending out some flyers and doing the best he could to organize it. So I think he gets a lot of credit for the original organization of what is now Carolina Old Boys Foundation. And then, in terms, and he was a heck of a player in his day as well. Just ask him, he'll tell you. No, but I mean, he was, he was a former, I think he was a former walk-on Gamecock football player, lineman, defensive lineman, and was a good player. And then he claimed to be, of course, there were no statistics. He claimed to be at one point the all-time leading scorer in Carolina rugby history. Wow. And then Butch Setzer came along and beat whatever point total Howard gave him. Butch beat it. And again, I don't know if anyone's keeping stats there. I guess so. For that, you got to put Butch Setzer in there because he was one. And with this, it's not just about playing days, but for me, it's people that helped not only with the club, but helped grow the game. And Absolutely. Howard did that. Butch has done that, but he coaches several teams in Charleston. He's played forever, still plays occasionally. Guys like, in terms of players, I think one of the best players I ever played with, Todd Lacey was the guy's name, who was retired Navy now. He was the captain the year after I graduated. He was, we were about the same age. We actually lived together for a short time, and he was a wing forward and one of the hardest hitters and sure tacklers you'd ever see. He was in really good shape, obviously being part of the Navy, ROTC when he was in school. He was one of the best I played with at the college level, just because he was so consistent, in shape, hit people, things like that. There's other guys that I wish they had played longer, that they would have been there. There's always those guys that they're there for a semester or a year, then they kind of disappear, and you say, whatever happened to? So, if anyone can track down guys like, I'm trying to think of his name. There's a guy named Carlos. I can't even remember his last name. This would have been spring of 1990. He was built like a wrestler, super fast, could hit like a truck. And he was one of the best athletes I think we had during that time. And then he kind of disappeared after a year. Not sure what happened to him.
Call us if you're out there. Get in touch, pal.
Yeah. He was fantastic. But, those are some of the guys that quickly come to mind. And I'm sure, some of those other guys are going to say, why didn't you mention me? But those are the ones that actually, Mike Artlip was another really good player. He started playing, I believe it was my senior year was his first year on the team. And then he played for several years at USC after that, played with Old Gray for a long time. He was just another guy, who didn't miss tackles, ran straight through you, nothing fancy, but just a hard-nosed guy. And he's also another guy you talk about helping the club or help grow the game. I believe he was Mike, who's better known as Redneck to most of us in the D10 group that we're known as. He was, I believe he was the one who first established the nonprofit, or helped to get the paperwork done for the nonprofit. When he and it was me and Mike and Howard Hunt, when I was in Georgia for a long time, we're kind of running Cobb Weekend, even though I was living in a different state. And Mike was the one, I believe, who laid the groundwork to get it so we could have nonprofit status, and he could start making tax-free donations and things like that. So he gets a lot of credit, not only for being a really good player, but for also help keeping Cobb alive and helping it become what it's taken off to, what it is today.
Right. Yeah. Listen, I mean, there's a lot of great stories out there in terms of the nomination process that we're going through and we'll be going through soon to finalize the first class. And I'm just kind of blown away with some of the nomination forms that we have received, of just the worthiness of so many people that have came before me. And even before, you, Brad, I mean, you're not that old, but there's guys that are older than you that they're well deserving of these awards and these the Garnet jacket. Hopefully we'll get that going. That'll be fantastic. But yeah, I'm just supremely honored to be a part of the Hall of Fame committee, and making this first selection is a big deal, right? We want to honor the past and make sure that people are engaged for the future as well. And I think this will certainly help with that. But you were involved with Carolina Rugby Board as well, as you mentioned, for many, many years. You were at this past With You weekend, which is fantastic to have you there. What's your overall impressions of the health of the program at this point?
I think it's better than it's ever been. In fact, I'd been away from it for a couple of years, and I was pleasantly shocked. I shouldn't be surprised when you got guys like, Chris Murphy and John Roberts, who are, John Roberts being the coach now, and Chris Murphy, a big part of the board, just because those were guys that I played with and that were very successful outside of the rugby world as well. John's been a coach for a long time at a lot of different places. He was a great player. Chris, same way. And, Chris was an outstanding businessman. I shouldn't be surprised that it's going well, but I was blown away in terms of the organization, the funding, and where it's almost like a varsity sport now.
I know, yeah.
And it's neat to see the parental support, how they've gotten parents to get behind it, because, back when I first started playing, it wasn't like that at all. It was, it was a social club, but there, anything we had, everyone kind of chipped in $5 and $10 there, so we could, gas money for a trip. We'd put literally 12 people in a hotel room, in one room. And you just kind of found space on the floor. I mean, it was disgusting, but it's what you did. We didn't have money. We had to beg sponsors, to just so we could maybe pay a hotel room. We didn't have any kind of budget, or not much of a budget from the university at the time. So, I think the university just helped pay our union dues at the time. So I was just blown away with where it is today. And it makes me really happy that it's in good hands right now. And it seems I know it didn't happen overnight, but it feels like it, because I've been away for a couple of years in terms of involvement with the club and not being on boards and being heavily involved. And I've missed a bunch of With You or Old Boys weekends because of traveling with work. And so I was shocked with the level it's at right now, but shocked in a good way. So, hats off to everyone involved, yourself included. But with John, who's taken over the reins, coaching, and with people like Chris Murphy and everyone else that have just done a tremendous job. It was a great weekend, and just the club's in great shape right now.
I couldn't agree more. And mostly it's not because of me. I'm just there to look pretty and smile and and agree with people during the board meetings and do this. So all the rest of those guys on the board, Balmer does a fantastic job. Bill does a fantastic job, with organizing the With You weekend. He does great work. So everything seems to be progressing in the right direction, and it almost does feel like a varsity program. It really does. They're showing up in charter buses now, Brad, to games to play, Lander, and it's just what, it feels like everything that we would have wanted when we were playing back in the day, like when we talked about, we'd stay at a nice hotel, or, be able to afford all of us to eat at one location and not at Wendy's or whatever. That is happening now. So go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when I first started playing, this is back when you had the old, heavy cotton jerseys, that were long sleeve. Okay. And, after you got to sweating in them, they weighed about 20 pounds. Okay.
Disgusting. Yeah.
They were the old school, traditional rugby jerseys, and not everybody had one. You had a set for the team of 15 jerseys, or maybe 17 jerseys for a couple of subs. Because back then the rules were different. You could only sub 2 or 3 players in a game. And you couldn't go back in if you were out. So, you were capped. So let's say we had 17 jerseys. They weren't yours. You put them in a bag after the game, and then somebody, I know for some years it was me. I was the guy that would wash the jerseys, once a week, and then you just handed them out. Those things were nasty. The worst was if you had to play B-side, because we only had one set of jerseys. And if you played if there was an A game and if it was hot, they were 20 pounds, and we'd lay them out. And then if you had to play the B game, you had to put on someone else's sweaty, nasty jersey and play that. That was the incentive to try to make the A team.
I got to tell you, man, like the Free Jacks do a fantastic job with their jerseys, and they're coming out with one tomorrow, but they always have the collars and people love them, all the old school guys.
Yeah.
And for me, like they look great, but it reminds me of these jerseys that you're talking about that weigh 25 pounds. Like people don't understand the humidity of Columbia, especially at the beginning of the fall when you're playing games. You weigh 30 pounds and it's just completely soaking with sweat. So that has always bothered me. It reminds me, it gives me like PTSD thinking about those disgusting cotton jerseys back in the day. But yeah, good times, man, for sure. Let's get into like talking about you as a broadcaster, because like people are going to see the name and like, I think I know who that is, and they're going to see you're like, oh yes, that's Shane Beamer. No, not really. You're the women's basketball guy. So you're the director of content at Carolina, and for those that somehow don't know, you're a radio broadcaster for the pride of our university, the two-time national champion Lady Gamecocks women's basketball team. It feels great to be able to read that out loud, to be so successful at a sport like that. How did you get started in broadcasting?
Well, I graduated from South Carolina. My degree was in broadcasting, and figured because there was no way I was going to play professional sports, and wanted to do sports for a living. Wasn't sure how I was going to do it. I had originally started out working in news in Columbia at a radio station here back when I lived with Wyatt Shepard, and worked about 70 hours a week working news, and knew I didn't want to work news. I wanted to work radio. And then found a job opportunity in Milledgeville, Georgia, at a radio station, where I was offered a job as a sports director there. And I was broadcasting for Georgia College, which is a Division II school down there, doing their basketball and baseball games, and then doing a broadcast for 3 local high schools there, football, basketball, baseball. And then there was a junior college there as well. We'd do some football with them. I had a daily 4-hour air shift where I was spinning records and all that. So
Nice.
I started this radio station for $12,000 a year. My first 6 months there, I think I lost 15 pounds because even in 1993, which is when I moved down there, 12,000 wasn't any money, especially once you took taxes away. And so, I literally, I didn't eat very much that first year. And so I was at that radio station for 3 years, had a ball. And from the first time I did a game, I realized, this is definitely what I want to do. And then an opportunity opened up at Georgia College in the sports information department to work there. And they would allow me to still do the broadcast with my partner from the radio station. The caveat was I was going to make more money working at the college. It actually, the first year there, it doubled my salary, and I thought I was loaded because I had some money left over. And then the longer I stayed there, I was down in Milledgeville for 13 years, broadcasting for the college there. The longer I was there, the more I tried to do in terms of fundraising and marketing and things for the athletics department, because we didn't really have a marketing department in addition to sports information. And so they kept changing my title and upping my salary because I kept doing things that weren't part of my job. And then by the time I left, I was the assistant athletics director, and I was doing some of the work for our athletics director at the time was semi-retired. So I was doing some of his responsibilities, and I loved it. Had a great time there. It was a great 13 years. And then the last couple of years there, I was dating the woman who's now my wife, Catherine. She was here in Columbia, who I met, by the way, at an old boys weekend here, which was fantastic. And so we did the long distance dating for about 2 years. It's about 2.5 hours between Columbia and Milledgeville. And then decided, if I'm going to get married, I need to move to Columbia because there was more opportunity. It was in Columbia. Started off at the Alumni Association here and thought the broadcasting gig was over. But a couple months after I got here, I'd had an opportunity to fill in doing some of the softball webcasts back before the SEC network, just because the guy that was there was the women's basketball / softball broadcaster. There was crossover in the season. They needed some help. I filled in for him. So I was like, all right, this is cool. My broadcasting career is not over after all. And then after that season, as it so happened, he left for another job. And the person in charge of hiring for the broadcast for South Carolina happened to be having lunch with for something else, for some Alumni Association news. And she said, "Hey, this is before Dawn Staley got here," and says, "Hey, there's this opening for women's basketball. Would you be interested in doing that?" And I said, "Yeah." And I didn't even ask how much it paid. The team wasn't very good at the time,
Right.
but I didn't care. I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it." And so I became the radio guy for women's basketball, which like I got in at the right time. Again, it was the year before Dawn Staley got here, and obviously things got up. So this is what, my 17th year doing women's basketball. But that also led to some other opportunities too, because a couple years later, they launched the SEC Network, and for a lot of the games that are on SEC Network Plus, they don't staff that through ESPN; they staff that through local talent, and so people like myself and Derek Scott, who's our men's basketball guy and baseball guy, we started doing a lot of the TV broadcasts. Like for me, I do women's soccer and softball for SEC Network. Occasionally I would fill in on baseball or things like that. Actually, before the SEC Network launched, we used to do some television replay broadcasts for football. This was back when Spurrier was winning 11 games a year. And
good old days.
Yeah, those were some good years. What they would do is we would do a broadcast live at the game, or if it was on the road, we'd travel with the team as well. It was me and Andy Demetra, who was our men's basketball guy at the time. Would do a broadcast in a different booth, just like the live TV, and then they would edit it down to about from a 3-hour game to a 2-hour show and replay it on the Sports South Network on Sundays. So I got to do that for about 3 or 4 years until they launched the SEC Network, and that went away. But that was a blast because got to go to all around the country with the football team and watch some great football. The funniest part about that football experience was because they would edit it down to a 2-hour show. I was actually the color analyst for that. Why they didn't get another player, I don't know, but I'm glad they didn't, because I had a blast. You basically had 2 play-by-play guys there, but basically because they had to cut it down from 3 hours to 2 hours, almost everything I said got cut off. So I still got a check, but for the most part, the only thing you ever heard me say during those replay broadcasts was, "That's right, Andy," and then zip it.
Oh boy! Wow. Yeah, sure. I bet it was. It's interesting. Like, and you're such a rugby guy, and you've got this background in broadcasting. I know you do a fantastic job. Have you ever been interested in trying to get involved with MLR? Commentating.
I never thought about it. It was mainly because of where I am now. I'm 53, and I wasn't looking on to I'm hoping I never have to move again. I'm at the point where I'm happy where I am, and obviously happy with the gig I've got. So really, once I got here and got into a good thing, I wasn't really looking to go anywhere else. And once I had a son, I wanted to make sure I could do a lot of things with him. Especially, the things that we do together when I'm not working a basketball or softball game is we go to every Carolina home baseball game. That's kind of what we like to do. And we go to all the home football games together. That's our thing. So, so I enjoy do that. So once I got the gig here, I wasn't really looking to expand to anything else. And, but the interesting thing was I also teach a class at the university on sports broadcasting. And I had one of my former students who got a job as a play-by-play guy up at Queen's University in Charlotte. And they had him doing every kind of sport for webcasts and things like that. He said he even had to do a rugby game, and he had never seen rugby before. And I told him, I was like, "You should have called me." I could have helped you.
Give him some pointers for sure.
Yeah, I could have told you at least the rules. But he figured it out. He's doing really good. So
that's awesome. Yeah, man. Dallin Stanford is one of my good friends. He's been on my show, the other one that I do, many times. I think he's the world's best rugby commentator. And, I always ask him about preparation and what he does prior to each and every game. He does a lot of sevens games, and those are multiple throughout the day. So, his preparation is just incredible. But I wanted to ask about yours. Do you have a specific, prep that you do for a women's basketball game that you continue to do throughout all of the entire season? Is it just random, or is it a set school of thought?
It's pretty simple at this point. Because I've been doing basketball games for between here and Georgia College for 30 years now, that you kind of get into a routine. I think it's one of the easier sports to prepare for because there's so few players. Usually you're dealing with maybe 12 people on a roster, and most of the time, unless the game's a blowout, it's, about 8 people that are going to play the most for each team. But yeah, usually I like to work well ahead. Like I'll get the shell of my spotting chart done for each game well in advance with all the the basic information, who they are, where
Mhm.
they're from, height, what any accolades from previous years or anything that's noteworthy, that's in their bio. And then when you get a day or two before, a couple of days before the next game, then you update it with current stats and any trends and anything else you can find out about them. So it's fresh in your mind, but also so you
Mhm.
have the most updated stuff. And it doesn't really take that long anymore. You kind of get it down where you get it all. You can make a full spotting chart in, I don't know, 30 or 40 minutes. A lot of it just stays in my head. And then after, I'll review it a couple of times before each game. So it's fresh in my head before the game, and then it's ready to go. And it's just, at this point, it's riding a bike. I find it pretty
Sure.
easy. Other sports are more difficult if you don't do them as often and there's more players. But
Yep.
With basketball, since that's the sport that I've worked the most over the last 3 decades, that it just becomes pretty routine.
Listen, I mean, you do a fantastic job. So whatever
Thanks.
you're doing, keep it up, man, for sure. But I wanted to ask you about Dawn Staley. Like, how can I not, right? Like, any funny stories about Dawn that you can share, because you get to see her more than most of us do.
Well, she's great, and she's been really good to my family over the years, and she's always been good to me. A couple of things is that she's a very straightforward, real person. I remember the first game that I did with her first year here, and she'd already been a head coach at Temple for 8 years, I think, before that. So she'd been a coach before. But we did our pregame. We always record our pregame interview about an hour before the game, and we did the interview. And I hit stop afterwards, and she said, "Was that okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, it was fine, coach." But she wanted to make sure she was doing right, and
Right.
I just thought that was cool. But now it's just routine. And then I think my favorite story with her was one year we were playing a tournament. Every other year we play a neat tournament around Thanksgiving, like somewhere in the Bahamas or Virgin Islands or somewhere cool like that, And so we're in the Virgin Islands one year, I think, and my son had just been born, and he was with us. He was about, I don't know, 5 months old. And we were sitting there eating dinner, and we were trying to feed him a bottle, and he was kind of fussing and stuff.
Mhm.
And Coach Staley got up because she had already finished her dinner. And she said, "Give me that baby." And she picks him up and just starts feeding him the bottle and walks away and just, told us to go eat our dinner. So my wife and I got to eat our dinner in peace and quiet. And she walked away and was
Wow.
just feeding my son a bottle. And I just thought it was cool. Like, he has no idea that, this one of the greatest players in, women's basketball history and an Olympic champion and all that is feeding him a bottle right now.
That's a wild story, man. That's really good. Yeah, I mean, just seems like the nicest lady in the world, the biggest celebrity in Colombia. I was telling you about my brief encounter with her before we got on here, and I'm just blown away with her cult of personality it's through the roof. Like everybody loves Dawn,
Yep.
in Colombia. So long may that continue. She's
Yeah.
got him. Cruising right now. So yeah, hopefully that continues. But final question for you here, Brad. We've covered a lot tonight, but what if there's a high school or transfer student out there watching this right now or in the future, what would you say to them about playing at Carolina as a rugby player, Gamecock?
You're going to be taken care of. One, you're going to have a coach who knows what he's doing, for one. So you're going to learn the game. Two, you're going to be put in a good environment, and he cares about you. John's a good guy. John Roberts is a good guy that he's a very caring individual. He's going to be straight with you. He's going to teach you the game, and you're going to be surrounded by good people. And as we said before, it's a program that, in terms of how it's run, is certainly on the rise. And it's hard to believe, I know there's colleges that are, that have treated rugby or have made it a varsity sport, over the years and stuff, but you're going to have a great experience because of the people that are running it now. And you're going to have a great experience because, as anybody who's played the game knows, you're going to have friends for life.
That's right.
And, the neat thing about rugby, really anywhere, is there's always that appreciation for people who play the game. It doesn't matter how good you were or how good you were not. If you played, there's that respect that you had the guts to step out on the field. So you know what? You're one of us. You're okay.
Hell
and it doesn't matter where you're from, rich, poor, black, white, male, female. It doesn't matter. If you played, you're okay.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it, man. It's a fraternity or a sorority where like we only understand it because we all played together. It's one of those things. Like if you play just for 10 minutes, you're one of us
Yep.
because you've played the greatest game that ever existed. I know basketball is great, but rugby is the best.
It's the ultimate team sport, and
Yes.
it's I never had to wear a tie for anything rugby related.
There you go. There you go. Absolutely, Brad. This has been fantastic, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. We say 2 words, you know, the famous athletic thing that we like to throw out there as Gamecocks when we exit the video. And we're going to do that in 3, 2, 1. Spurs up. Almost got it wrong. Cheers, pal. Bye bye.